All right, folks are just starting to come in. Welcome. We're going to hang back just a few minutes while the attendees start trickling into this webinar. And we'll do the introductions in just a minute or three. But I do want to thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you being here today. Joining me is John Kreidler, obviously. He's going to tell us a bit about his Leica story. But let's wait a few more minutes just to let more attendees get in before we get started, so nobody's out of the loop on everything. For those that are joining for the first time and haven't really used Zoom before, down at the bottom are some controls. You'll notice there is a chat panel as well as a Q&A panel. You can say hello through the chat, send us messages if you'd like, but if you do want to ask a question either relevant to what John is talking about or anything else Leica related, send it through the Q&A portal, please, because it's easier for us to check off and verify that we actually answered it. I don't want anybody's questions to get missed. How we generally handle the questions and answers during these is if it's relevant to what John is currently talking about, I will break in and ask him the question. If it's something just general, we'll wait towards the end. We typically start our questions at a question and answer period around the 45-minute mark. So we will handle that as we get to it. So seeing as the entries have tapered off slightly, I think what I am going to do is get started right about now. So thank you for coming to today's webinar, A Leica Story with John Kreidler. I'm your host, Anthony Festa. I work at Foto in Manhattan. This is a continuation of our bite-sized virtual learning. We started the bite-sized virtual learning in store as a way to showcase and hold and share small bits of targeted information to you. And with the current climate of what's going on, we've pivoted to make this a virtual learning series with webinars that we host a couple times a week. You can head to photocare.com to check out our events page and see what else we have coming up. We've got, I believe, one more this week, and we've got 3 or 4 next week, actually. So we're definitely trying to share as much content as we can with you all. So for me, I'd like to give you a little bit of my Leica story as well. I work in the tech support, training, and sales section of PhotoCare, and I first experienced Leica when I was a junior in college. I went to SUNY New Paltz, beautiful little town of New Paltz, New York in the Hudson Valley. One of the grad students actually had a Leica 3F red dot, and it was the first time I had actually seen a Leica in person. And we were commenting on the prints that she was making because everything she was doing was 24x36. And I hadn't seen a 35mm neg blown up that big that looked that beautiful. And we kind of got into it. We started talking about the lenses that she had and the camera system. And it's always been something that's been on my radar, though it's never been anything that I've personally owned. Fast forward to about, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and I started working at a place similar to PhotoCare, but wasn't PhotoCare, where we also had Leica. That was actually the first time I really had hands-on with the digital M cameras and the S cameras. And I got really familiar with the lens, not really familiar with the lenses, but I started to get familiar with the lenses, the optics, the design, the beauty and simplicity of the design of the camera. I mean, look at a Leica and tell me it's not a gorgeous camera. I mean, it's fantastic not only to see, but to hold and to use. There's something so simple and intuitive about the Leica setup that you can pick it up and run out and take images without thinking about it. And it's been, you know, I moved on from that job, came back to New York, and once again, John and I's paths crossed, and he always makes sure that when something new comes out, that he gets it in my hands so I can see it, test it, give feedback, talk about it. He gave me this neat little Leica pin that I'm actually wearing today. I don't currently own a Leica, but I am absolutely eyeing a film Leica at some point, and it will happen. But with that said, I'm very excited for John's Leica story. He's got a bunch of beautiful images. He is a wealth of knowledge, so I'm going to turn it over to John. I'm going to mute myself. And if you have any questions, feel free to send them through the Q&A portal. John, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right, I can't share my screen.
Give me a second. Hang on. I can fix that. There you go. Now you can share your screen.
All right, great. Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate it. Thanks for PhotoCare for putting this together. Let's talk a little bit about Leica. And like Anthony had said, any questions, put them in the Q&A panel, and we'll be sure to answer all your questions. So today's agenda, I'm going to have a little introduction to myself. I'm going to talk about the Leica Look, and then we're going to look at images from the S System, SL, M, and CL System. So all interchangeable lens system cameras. My name is John Kreidler. I'm the East Coast product specialist for Leica Camera USA. I primarily work with the professional or system cameras. I do work with professional photographers, support them on their events, help them with their academy programming, as well as any kind of equipment needs. If something comes up, they need an extra piece of gear, or they're having issues, say, with their gear, I would be their liaison. I also do store and dealer training. So like I would go into PhotoCare, I would do training on the new products, and then I also do demos and dealer events as well at other places around, sometimes virtual, and hopefully someday soon in person again. I also conduct academy workshops. The Leica Academy is the educational arm of Leica Camera, and we enjoy very much to offer educational programming, not just to teach new things, but also to give those interested an opportunity to try out the latest Leica gear. If you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is Leica Pro Image. And that lovely portrait done by my good friend, Mark Matt. Okay, so first, let's talk a little bit about the Leica Look. A lot of people talk about the Leica Look. What is it? What does it really mean? So the Leica Look is the result between our optics, our sensor, and our color theory. Our lenses are designed to give peak performance when shot wide open, which is somewhat unique in the grand scheme of camera manufacturing. Most manufacturers won't tell you that their lenses will be the sharpest shot wide open. But it's more than just sharpness. It's also how the lenses render, the out of focus bits, the emotional parts of an image, and how they look and how three-dimensional our images look. Another component, not necessarily of the Leica Look, but the user interface, as Anthony had alluded to, is very simplistic. It allows the photographer to not worry about settings or how to change settings, but in a very intuitive manner, we've laid out menus and kind of how the camera works and how it functions is very intuitive. So now we'll take a look at some images. So the first up, we'll talk about the Leica S. So this is the medium format camera system. It has 15 stops of dynamic range, and that's what I'm trying to show here with this image. So this image, as it was taken, just straight out of the camera, normally I would expose for the highlights, and then in Lightroom, bring up the shadow detail. So with 15 stops of dynamic range, there's a lot of ability to pull out more detail in the shadows and still retain highlights. In general, when I'm doing Photoshop work or Lightroom work or with Capture One and processing out images, I try to do as little as possible because I really want to show the personality and the uniqueness of the lenses. Here's an example, really, of what I would call the quintessential Leica Look, where we have this very sharp plane of focus here in this pulley, and these ropes as they go from the foreground to the plane of focus. You kind of have this out of focus, in focus view, and then the fishnet in the back and just the general look of the out of focus bits or the bokeh really creates an image that's very three-dimensional. And that plays into how I like to shoot. In general, when I'm looking to create and compose images, I'm looking to fill foreground, middle, and background. But shooting wide open allows me to put the emphasis on the subject or the place that I want the viewer to look at. So being able to do that shooting wide open and having this very natural, not only natural three-dimensional looking image, but also very natural looking color lends itself to my style of photography. This is an S, being a street photographer's camera. A lot of times people don't think an S, because it's of its size, being medium format, that people would use it as a street photography camera. I've done it. It's very rewarding. What I like about this image, again, is how when you zoom into the most famous man in Little Havana, smoking a cigar, what really starts to get me interested or excited about an image like this is just how the gentle tones of like the cigar smoke, how it just kind of weaves, but also his face is still, it's sharp. And then the background, again, is not as sharp. That, again, allowing the image not really shot fully wide open at 6.8, but yet being able to give that look, that shallow depth of field look to being three-dimensional. Here's a time exposure, also shot with the S. So again, at f8, everything looks like it's in focus, and it's a 3-second exposure, but very natural color and an image with a lot of detail. I particularly like how our lenses, when we look at the bokeh, we look at these little points of light and how they become more star-like. But again, it's just a very three-dimensional looking image, great natural color. Here's a photograph of it's a 1934 MGK3. I'm sure Anthony knew that. And so this was taken outside in bright sunlight at one of my favorite places to go, the Simeone Auto Museum. And what I guess the reason I wanted to show this, is again the fact that you have a shallow depth of field even at f4 8.8, but you can still tell what the background is. And also on this highlight, there's no artifacting, so and no chromatic aberration. So again, it's something that our lenses do. Part of that is due to the fact that each element is coded like 42 times, just to make sure that there aren't issues with chromatic aberration. But again, just the very three-dimensional look, the Leica look of the image. Okay, so moving on to the SL format, the SL2. So both these portraits were created with an S lens. So I'm using a medium format lens on a mirrorless 35 millimeter mirrorless body. What I like so much about the S lenses is their contrast and how they just create images, particularly portraits, that are so very flattering. Again, this was shot wide open at f2, but because of the distance, I have enough depth of field where I'm not totally isolating the subject's face. You know, this guy here offering his M10D to the photo gods. It's just kind of an interesting image. The other thing that I find interesting is the S lenses on the SL2, it kind of splits the difference between what I'm going to show next, which would be the 75 Noctilux M lens. Here, the contrast is much sharper. The lens itself is rendering where it's focusing, I feel, much sharper. The fall off is far more dramatic. But again, a similar look. And, you know, if you didn't have, say, $15,000 for a 75 Noctilux that may be using a 100 millimeter Summicron S lens, that's not that much, and there's a fair amount of S lenses used that can be picked up. But again, the Noctilux, to me, if I only had one lens to shoot portraits with, and money, of course, money was no object, the 75 Noctilux would be it. I just really like how it renders, how snappy the contrast is, how the fall off is. When you look here in the bokeh, just how it renders to me is just it's just beautiful, just incredibly again, three-dimensional. Color is nice, and it's really a for us, I think, a hallmark lens. Now I'm going to show some images with the 24-90 zoom. A lot of people feel a zoom can't be sharp, it can't be that great. They're big, they're heavy. What I find interesting about the 24-90 zoom, well, it's a 2.8 to f4, which again, a lot of people complain here. This is shot at 90 millimeter at f4, and I still have this dramatic fall off. Of course, my lighting helped quite a bit with it in terms of the fall off, but look how incredibly sharp the face is, and details in her hair design. This was from a workshop we did with, I think it was with Mark DiPaolo, and man, stop touching that. And again, it's just beautiful. I think this lens, the 24-90, to me is like 6 primes in one. It's also image stabilized, but to me, just an incredible lens and very flexible, and it makes it hard to not take along with me on a shoot, particularly when I'm doing things like this where I'm trying to capture either images that we're doing in a workshop, or here where I'm supporting, say, Mark Mann at Tribeca, and we're trying to get some behind the scenes images. It's the SL with the zoom lens. I've got this really nice natural fall off, the blur in the foreground. The subject is tack sharp. The background is obviously not, has a lot of fall off, and really points to the subject of the image. And again, part of the appeal to me with any of our cameras, whether it's an SL or an M or the S or even the CL, is a simplicity in design. When I'm doing something like this, I'm like trying to be a bug on the wall. I'm trying to be almost invisible. And at 6'3", it's hard for me to be invisible or small. So when I go in, I just want to lean in, take my shot, know the image is going to come out, and understand how the camera works, and any adjustments I have to make. It's very simple and very easy to do. This is Anthony, any guess? He's just smiling. This is a 63 Jaguar front end.
I'm actually muted, so it took me a second to unmute myself. If it was a Jaguar, I'm just not that great on the years with those.
Yeah. So this, I believe, is Series 1. So that's the one that's worth all the money. So all those collectors out there. So again, shot with the 24-90 at about let's call it 70 millimeter. Part of what I like to do when I go to a car show and a car event, and I do enjoy this type of photography, is I like to go very early when the light is dim and people are just setting up. They're just bringing in their cars, and it just allows you to get beautiful images like this. I'm not always interested in capturing the entire vehicle. I like to kind of pick and choose the angles and styles. But again, this is one of my favorites. I really like the work of Michael Furman, and not that this has anything to do with him in any way, but he has interesting techniques where he's basically starts with no light and builds light. And I think that's why I like this image so much, is that there isn't a whole lot of light on it. And it just looks like something that he may have created basically because there's very little light on it. So this is an image I took in the Haba in New York. We were doing some research for trying to find a replacement for we had an aerial photography workshop, and this was just after the little incident over at Fly Nyon, and we were just looking for other things, other shooting opportunities to take people out and enjoy. So we're sailing around the harbor, and what I like about this image is this cutter just kind of cut right in front of us, and it was only a split second that I had to take this image. But with the zoom lens, the flexibility of the zoom lens, and how quick and easy the focus grabbed it, and how I was able to adjust the image, I was able to capture this image straight away. So it's definitely one of my favorites. It's one that will is to be featured in a book of the Leica Academy instructors. So hopefully those books will start to ship soon. It is available on Amazon. Just Google it. But anyway, it's a shot that really shows the sharpness in the cutter, and then as we're looking at the skyline of the city, we have this real natural fall, but still enough detail to know where you're at. I thought this would be appropriate for this time in many ways. So again, the SL shot with the zoom, with Wilbur, the famous Dave's pig, in front of the Capitol. So again, it's an SL with that zoom. Again, is a camera that you can use for street photography. Again, very sharp, but not much fall off. So if you don't like the most shallow depth of field, in an instance like this, I purposely wanted more things in focus. I kind of wanted to see and get the feel of the people, and have a little more detail on the Capitol building behind it, just to kind of give a little editorial look to the image. Let me go back, maybe. So this is something that's interesting, at least for me, and I guess we'll see what happens. So we're in Florida on a family vacation. We're going through a botanical garden, and my wife screams and smacks her shoulder, and this little guy landed on the ground. So apparently he had dropped out. So while he was stunned, but I understand he's made a full recovery, I put the SL with the 24-90 down. I might have been 20 inches or so away from him, and using the Photos app, so we have a Bluetooth Wi-Fi app, I was able to capture this image, focus specifically on his eye, and shoot. So without that capability, I probably wouldn't have gotten that shot. I probably would have gotten down to my knees to just about get the camera in place and he would run off. Again, it's just showing the flexibility and, again, three-dimensionality of the image, the sharpness, and just in general the shallow depth of field even at f4. This is now the SL2, not the SL, but with the 24 to 90 at 90 millimeters. And just to show, the amount of detail here, even in f4, I still have this really nice fall off, but so much detail, you can almost count the divisions here in the wings of this bee and kind of each individual hair. So again, just very easy to take these kinds of images. The camera itself is going to be very sharp. The lenses, the lenses are going to be very sharp. The user interface is going to be very, very simple. So even if you're afraid of bumblebees, you can take photographs of bumblebees. These images, I'm working on a project I wanted to do in New York called Dogs of New York, that hopefully sometime post-COVID we'll be able to do on the streets of New York, and just to do dog portraits in different locations. So I was getting some practice in with the 50 SL, the 50 Summicron SL with the Jack Russell, and then the 90 with the miniature dachshund. So I think that the thing to remember about the SL2 is how quick it focuses. Most dogs aren't going to stay posed for you. You kind of got to move in and go with it. And again, shooting even at 5.6, very close in with the 50, I still have on this Jack Russell a very background that's very soft. And with the dachshund, obviously at 90, shot wide open, again, a very shallow depth of field. Okay, so now another M lens. So with Leica, I think part of our message is we want to offer many different looks. Things are very cinematic, but not everything has to be tack sharp or razor sharp. So this was shot on the SL with the 50 millimeter Noctilux at 0.95. And this is, we were scouting for a workshop in DC. And you know how Leica photographers, like most, just enjoy a good stinky steam bath. So we were fortunate that we had a somewhat willing participant walking through the steam. But the overall image, even though it's not tack sharp, it gives a feeling of this kind of mysterious thing that's going on. And again, that's something that our cameras and lenses do. That's part of the look, that it gives you more of this emotional content here that allows you to think maybe, or has the viewer maybe just thinks more about the image and kind of what's going on, rather than having all the stark sharpness to it. So again, if that's part of your visual signature, that would be a lens for that. So this is with the 50 Summicron, and again, just trying to demonstrate how sharp that lens is, and then how beautiful the fall off is with the SL2. This was someone's display in DC. The M10 monochrome, so a new camera for us. What I like about this camera is its ability to shoot at extremely high ISO. So this was shot at 32,000. And again, 1/8 of a second, so there's a bit of subject movement, but I'm still struck by the overall feeling of the image. And that's, again, part of the Leica Story. And my Leica Story is when I'm shooting M in particular, it allows me to go beyond just looking for sharpness and fall off. I'm looking more at emotional value of images. Speaking of emotion, This was at a show in Brooklyn with Doyle and Doyle's band about a year ago. And I was fortunate enough to shoot with the 75 Noctilux. But again, very sharp, but again, the background and how the bokeh looks. And to me, again, an example of the three-dimensional, but also emotional. Now, the advantage of shooting an M at a concert like this, where it is low light, you're not looking through the lens, you're looking through a separate rangefinder, where it might be a little harder to focus, but it's much easier to see in general because you're not looking through a lens. So again, it's another tool for another type of shooting. Here's some more M photography, more traditional street stuff. That again, I enjoy going out shooting with the M kind of on my own. If I'm going to do street photography, it can be very simple, doing architecture like this, zone focusing, things like this, where there's more contrast. But this with the M10 monochrome, the dynamic range to me is just insane in terms of its ability to render all these different shades of gray, being able to retain highlights, but also, if I wanted to pull out the shadow details. So another way of shooting that I like to shoot if I'm on vacation is kind of the f8 and be there. It really makes an M camera a much more of a point and shoot. So it's handy for people who may not want their photos taken, or you're trying to capture something in a certain way. But again, the images are very sharp. They're very three-dimensional. Okay, and the last camera I want to talk about is the CL. So the CL shares the same lens mount as the SL and SL2. So this was shot with, but it's an APS-C size sensor, so physically a smaller camera. In fact, here it is with the 18. I usually have it with me all the time. It's the Q camera that would actually fit in your pocket and be able to change lenses. So again, this was shot with the zoom, the 24-90, and again, getting a little more reach. So effectively, 90 would be like a 135. And I just like the way it produces images. It's, again, easy to use, very small and compact. Here's the CL with the 50 Summicron SL at an event. We were doing portraits. And what I found incredibly interesting is that here's an APS-C size sensor, 24 megapixel, but you look at the detail and sharpness, and a lot of that is the lens. But with the 50, then it becomes a 75 millimeter magnification. So to me, the CL is a great option to carry with me when I'm shooting the SL or the SL2. That way I can carry two lenses, but actually have four lenses with me. And it's I think the CL, it's because of its size and ease of use, its rendering capabilities just gives you a very nice fall off. And here, I think this is the last shot I have. This is the CL with the 18, the lens I just showed. And I like using it for black and white conversion because of the pixel dimension. It has a very smooth gradient and does a really nice job in terms of transitioning. It really, whatever we're doing with the images when we're converting, and you've seen I converted several of our color images to black and white, but something about the CL that makes it just more interesting. And I attribute it to the fact that the pixel dimension is smaller than what the SL was, and just how it renders. So All right. I think that's it. Let's see. Yep. So that's everything I've got, all my images and all my stories. So were there, Anthony, any questions
Oh,
or?
yeah, we've definitely got a few questions, and I actually really love the SL when you let me borrow that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, portable little camera, amazing optics. The images that I got out of it were really, really gorgeous little files. But let's dive into the questions. So the first one I have
Okay.
is from Bill Kybers. He asks if you were allowed only one Leica, which camera and why?
Wow. Uh, okay. I would say right now the SL2. And the reason I would say that is it's it's kind of the Swiss Army knife. Since it is mirrorless, you have many lens options, 170 or so just from Leica. But also, if you needed a longer piece of glass, like Nikon or Canon, could be adapted. Sigma and Panasonic also, and Sigma and Panasonic also make lenses now, and there'll be more longer lenses. So for me, the SL2 is kind of it. I enjoy shooting M lenses on it, so that's how I would go.
Yeah, I've definitely had some nice results with the SL2 in either M lenses or R lenses. It becomes even more compact at that point. While you
Yeah,
lose the beautiful autofocus, you can still utilize those older lenses if you already have them in your kit, and
right.
still figure out some amazingly beautiful images. I've got another question from Amy Arbus. She asks, which camera would you recommend for a pro portrait photographer? Is there a great zoom?
Well, I guess it would depend. Uh, the SL2 again with the 24 to 90 is a great combination. Uh, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Um, I mean the S Type 7 that's discontinued, or now the S3 would be possibly another option. I mean, it really would depend on your budget. But for me, the SL2, in terms of being a portrait camera, its ability, both the S and the SL2 can tether, which I think would be crucial. So the M currently doesn't tether to a computer, only to the app, and same for the CL. So for definitely, if tethering is part of the scenario that you like to work, the SL2 would give you, I think, a lot more flexibility than the S. But there is something magical about portraits taken uh, with the S. So if you are more studio, the S might be a choice, where there is a 30 to 90 zoom. So it's like a 24 to 70. Uh, but I think overall, probably the best choice would be the SL2 with the 24 to 90.
Thanks, John. Reg asks a question, does Leica plan to support ProRes RAW via Atomos or otherwise? I assume that it won't support Blackmagic RAW.
Don't know. I mean, at this point, I mean, all that would be great, but you know, we're not really sure. Uh, Basically, it's a feature that doesn't exist, so it's something that we just don't discuss. Sorry, sorry about that.
All good. Thank you for that. Kevin W. has a question. Are there any aspherical Leica lenses that have non-glass or hybrid aspherical element? Are they all glass? Anything interesting to note about the production of those elements?
Everything that we do is glass. Uh, each of those elements, whether uh, made with apochromatic glass, or I think, if I'm remembering correctly, there's it might be 40 or more types of glass that we use in the manufacturing of different lenses. Um, and they're all glass. Each element is coated multiple times. I think the other thing that's unique is as we're producing elements to make lenses, they're within like an error of 0.0001%. So there's a very tight tolerance to what we do when we're manufacturing lenses, and that allows us to have consistency across many lines in terms of color and basically color. Contrast might vary from line to line. Like I think you'd find the SL lenses a little higher contrast, generally speaking, than all the M lenses, although you look at a 50 aposummicron or a 75 Noctilux, those lenses contrast the same as an SL lens. So hopefully that answered it.
Well, if it doesn't, he can always chime back in with a follow-up.
Okay.
We've got a couple more to jump to, so let's keep.
Okay.
Jody W asks, I am a film photographer and use Leica MP with a 28mm lens. I shoot mostly portraits. Digital is a new world for me. What do you recommend? So she's already shooting film on an MP.
Right, MP. So, I mean, to me, I would look at like an M body, because you're going to have that same feel and that same user experience using a rangefinder. And with the 28, so M10, M10P, if you like just black and white, even the 246, the predecessor to the M10M, would all be great choices depending on what you want. The big advantage to the monochromes, whether it's a 246 or even an M9M, which would be a CCD version, or the M10M, is that there's no bare filter. So that's two less light reflecting surfaces. So it just makes the image that much sharper. Some people feel it's almost like tech camera, medium format sharp in the rendering. So if the thing with the monochrome is, unless you're going to do multi-shot and use color filters, those images are going to be black and white, which again, that's a very personal decision about how you're shooting and what you're trying to create. But to me, based on being with an MP film body, I would look at an M10 or monochrome.
Thank you, John. Frederick asks, hi, John. What do you think about Walter Mandler's lenses, Noctilux 51 or Summilux 70, I'm guessing 75-1.4 instead of 74-1.4?
75, yeah.
Yeah, comparatively to Dr. Krabbe's latest aspheric ultra-fast lenses.
Well, Dr. Mandler, I think, designed or was head of design for over 500 different lenses at his time in Leica Canada. To me, the 50 Noctilux F1 is just a very special lens. The 1.2, the predecessor, was just so difficult to make, and it was the first aspheric lens ever made in 1966. That would be the 1.2, and they're sought after. And if you find one, it's not that they're hard to use, they were very hard to make. So in 76, when they came out with the F1, to me, it's a lens that I enjoy shooting when I get a chance, more so than the 0.95. I just like the bokeh and the emotional content of that lens. Peter Carba's lenses, the 50.95 was probably one of the first. I think that he actually was a big part of. But the 50 Apo is kind of the chestnut, the grandfather of all modern optics. So I like that as well. I think it's an incredible lens. It's just for a different look. So all this about a Leica Story, a big part of it is your visual signature. What do you like, and how do you like things to render? To me, in general, for photography, I like things that render where there's something that's definitely sharp, but I also like the out of focus bits, whether it's, the bokeh or that transition of from plane of focus to foreground background, and how three-dimensional that makes images appear. So I have an appreciation for all these lenses, but each person, you really need, to evaluate how does that lens fit your visual signature, how you see the world, how you want to create your images. So
like
that's all I got.
So let me dive in. We've got a few more. I actually found one in the chat from earlier on from Mark N asking, can you use focus peaking on the SL601 with M lenses?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, you can. You have to be in the focus peaking mode. So you can, when you press on the SL601, there's 4 buttons on the back. The bottom right button is the one that cycles through your display options. So what happens, a couple things happen. One is if you're shooting with, say, a 1.4 lens at 1.4 and there's not much contrast, it's difficult to see the peaking even when it's set to high. So I usually recommend, when you're doing that, when you're focusing, if you push the toggles button in, you'll go to 1-to-1 magnification, and then you should see the focus peaking much clearer. And then you can move that around to where you want. So that's kind of an advantage of the mirrorless camera versus the rangefinder. With the rangefinder, you're working with that patch in the center, but with a mirrorless camera, you can actually use the toggle and move that around.
Excellent. Thank you, John. We got a few more here still. Valentine Ganger asks, hey, John, why is the maximum exposure time of the M10P limited to 4 minutes? Would be interested in doing longer exposures.
Well, my guess is we don't want to, we have a standard for image quality. If we could have it go longer, we probably would. But my guess is that it has to do with just not being able to provide a good enough image for longer than that period of time.
Makes sense. Haley Geller is asking, hey, from New York City, I would love to get advice on what is a great first Leica. I have a Sony a6500 and a Fuji X100F and a Canon 5D Mark IV. I guess probably the next question that I would want to follow up with Haley if she were in the store is, what do you shoot? But based on what she has, maybe you can get something. Hopefully Haley can kind of everything and anything, she says. She shoots everything and anything.
Yeah.
So with that
well, I would, here's what I would say, is if you like that smaller footprint of camera and you like APS-C sensor size, the CL would be a great option. So it's a camera, we actually call it Oscar Barnack's legacy, because his whole idea in designing the first 35mm film camera was to make a camera that resolved like his field camera, but was able to fit in his pocket. So that being said, the CL allows you to use a bunch of lenses. You could shoot it with M lenses, you could shoot it with full frame SL lenses, or a line of TL lenses that are optimized for the APS-C size sensor. There's quite a range. There's zooms and there's primes. So a lot of choices. And I think that would be overall the best fit considering it sounds like you like the smaller footprint camera.
Yeah, yeah, that's and it's a great little camera, Haley. I was really impressed with the results I got out of it when I borrowed it, and I only had the 18 millimeter, which was fantastic for the type of stuff that I was using it for. Let's see. I don't remember prices off the top of my head, but John, do you remember pricing off the top of your head?
It depends.
Hey,
What pricing?
I'll answer this one direct and have him email me.
Okay, all right.
Kevin asks, and I'm guessing this is some sort of maybe inside joke. Thanks, because in regards to your lens, the lens question he had earlier. When does Hammertone SL2 come out with a winky face? I'm not 100% sure what that means, but you're laughing.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've done some Hammertone special edition cameras in the past, all film cameras, I'm pretty sure. So, but again, it's a product that doesn't exist, so I really can't comment on it.
Gotcha. Perfect. Works for me. And then, this is an interesting, maybe slightly off-topic conversation, and something that is obviously going around a lot. From Sam Mallow, how do you see photographers' place in the current COVID-19 era for street and home studio work? Any advice working from home and being a photographer?
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy times. I mean, I've kept in touch with. You know, obviously, I live outside of Philadelphia, and I've got many friends in the city, and they're doing a variety of things. Some are going, you know, PPE and up, you know, and going out and shooting a little bit, and just being really vigilant and trying to stay safe and be careful. I mean, and some of the imagery is just incredible and in some ways shocking, but it's storytelling. It's things that need to be shown. The other thing that I'm seeing is some photographers doing virtual photo shoots, you know, where they're basically doing a photo shoot over Zoom with a model, which again is something that is kind of interesting. Not really my cup of tea. Another photographer, like a photographer that I was talking to just last week, Brian Bowen Smith. He's doing this, and he's on Instagram. You could follow him if you'd like. He's doing this really cool drive-by shoots, which sounds like really like in the hood, you know, kind of a thing. But he's got I want to say it's a 1958 Chevy pickup truck called Pearl that's like a 5-window. And he's organizing photo shoots. He's in LA and he's driving cross country and organizing photo shoots along the way with people. So he photographs them. He's in his pickup truck and he's organizing shoots and photographing people like in their driveway where they want to meet at a place and shoot. And I thought, man, that is like over the top creative, you know, and out of the box. So, I mean, there's some of the things, you know, not to copy, but to take inspiration from and to say, you know, okay, you know, and I think there are ways. Obviously, you want to stay safe and you want to stay healthy. And you don't want to do anything to jeopardize you or the subject that you're photographing, you know, and your family or your pets, or your trash or your stockpile of toilet paper. I mean, how creative can you get now? Maybe you have a freezer full of steak. You want to photograph something, but anyway, I think that's it. I think everyone needs to find inspiration where they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, looking on Instagram to me a lot of times is a jumping off point. And I thought Brian's project is incredible. and obviously a very gifted photographer, but just some really very interesting ideas and images.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit to that. You know, there's lots of discussion. No one knows what the going back to work is going to be. So things are going to change for the short term, and who knows what the implications for those are on the long term. I can say from personal experience, I photograph a lot of landscape, and I photograph automotive. And there's no car shows. There's no setting up events, builders or motorcycle builders or anything like that. And so personally for me, while I can still go out and walk the streets and continue to make one of my personal projects, which is finding bizarre old cars parked out in New York City, I can still do that, but I definitely have my mask on while I'm out. But I can't make the landscapes like I used to. And being inside most of the time, I've actually pivoted to starting this month. I am myself doing a portrait and self-portrait project. And now I've never been a portrait photographer. Sure, I've done it every now and again, but this is something I am focusing on with just my family and myself. And it's challenging because it's not something that I'm used to, but I am doing it to stay creative, to stay active, and to keep working, and to try something new to see what I get out of it. So I've been doing a new portrait or self-portrait, a brand new one every single day this month thus far. Granted, we're only, 5-6 days in, but it's something I plan on doing every day. And actually, I've narrowed it down even more. I'm actually using my last stockpile of instant film. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we'll see at the end of May how it turns out.
Yeah, I mean it is challenging, and you know there's only so much Netflix you can binge, and there's only so much news you can tolerate.
Absolutely.
And you really need a creative outlet, and it could be getting more into tabletop or still life type applications. But it is challenging, and hopefully, we'll all be able to get back to the city and kind of doing what we love to do. Walking the city and doing photography and going to car shows and and that kind of thing. Going to museums. It's it's just strange to think how quickly things just turned upside down.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up the questions. I haven't seen any more pop in. So John, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today to spend.
My pleasure. Thank you guys.
Yeah. I definitely want to thank Manny, who is handling a lot of the questions behind the scenes. I want to thank the rest of the PhotoCare team. John Kosha, the store general manager, who's helped facilitating all of this and keeping it all in track and order. Jeff Hirsch, store owner. We're here trying to share educational content. So definitely swing over to the PhotoCare events page, photocare.com, and you can see what we've got on the schedule for the rest of this week, next week, and the foreseeable future. So we're going to continue to make things for you. So keep tuning in. I want to say thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Stay safe out there, people. See you soon. Bye.
Ciao.